Hi everyone. Oh, this is really loud. Hi everyone, my name is Adon. I'm the Dean of the Ventura chapter of the AGO. I'm so thrilled that you could be here to hear our friend Jonté Moore. This is our first event since I've stepped in as Dean for the chapter. And if you liked this event, there are more on the calendar, so please check out venturaago.org. We have our next event on March 11th. That is Dr. Daryl Robinson performing at Cal Lutheran on the Steiner Rec organ there. He'll be presenting a program of Baroque and modern music there. Very diverse program on that wonderful instrument. Also, there'll be a master class at 3 p.m. on March 11th there. So if you're interested, check out the website and feel free to sign up there. And check out our Facebook page also. Smash that like, as they say, and check us out. We also have an Instagram too, so check that out. Anyway, enough about me and the chapter. We have Jonté Moore. I met Jonté in my bachelor's, and he was always a wonderful pianist in the department, and he went off into his church and performed widely with Tommy Walker, and has toured in Korea and all sorts of wonderful places. So without further ado, let's welcome Jonté Moore.
Thank you, Doctor. It's nice to call him Dr. Fernandez for me because we were colleagues together as students, so now it's like, I need to give him his respect, you know? He's put in the work, so I gotta make sure I say Dr. Fernandez. So I'm truly grateful that you've called me to do this. And I'm grateful to be here. You'll learn a lot about me just by some of the words that I'm about to say right now. Because, as you know, I'm assuming, and I'm going to ask, many of you are obviously either musicians of some sort, right? Either play organ, play keyboard, or have some piano background or something, correct? So we have that natural niche of performing or entertaining, depending on how people are receiving what we're doing. And there's a lot of fun in it, and there's a lot of professionalism in it, and there's a lot of purpose in it in regards to the beauty of music. But in this context, even though there's probably going to be some presentation, some demonstration, but I always love to start by bridging the gap and taking me off of this stage and off of this pedestal. And I'm not better than you, I'm not performing for you, I'm here to help you in any way that I can, and we learn from each other. That's the way I grew up, that's the way I'm all about. So I want to make sure you feel that comfort, you feel that transparent to help me help you in this short amount of time that we have. Because an hour is definitely not enough time to tackle what we're trying to tackle, and I'm still learning myself. So I want to at least share that so you understand at least my heart behind it. Organ is very special for me, particularly obviously the Hammond organ. Piano was my main instrument, it still is. Since the age of 3, I started playing piano under my father, who was a musician, got his doctorate in organ performance and was a choral teacher, choral director and everything. So I was under his wing since that young age to be able to sit on the bench with him at home, when he's playing at church. And so I've always had that umbrella of music in my home and in my church. So classical piano was my main foundation. Never stopped it until all the way getting my undergrad degree at APU in piano performance. For classical music. But then while I was 9, bridging that gap, being with my father, I was able to start expanding my abilities to improvise, to remove myself from reading the notes in the hymnal or in the sheet music that I was given for classical music, because he was on the organ, another person was on the piano, we had bass, drums, guitar, and then they'll put me on a little keyboard to create. And I'm like, where's the sheet music? Here's your CD that they gave me, and listen. And I'm like, what do I listen for? Because there's a lot going on, choir and everything. So there was a whole molding of learning how to me, as they told me and other musicians saying, to create a song within the song. Not change the context of the song, but how can I enhance this with maybe a string patch or a horn patch or whatever space that I might hear in music, just like we do with the classical or jazz, where a teacher will give me something to transcribe. So I'm listening and trying to mimic that. So the same thing with the CD, I'll try to listen to what's on there. And that's what I was starting to emulate on the keyboard, which also kind of blended as I started learning the classical side that I really appreciate in regards to the classical music, the orchestra music. So when I'm playing strings on keyboard, or when I'm playing horns on the keyboard, then they were using those tools from my classical background to say, hey, think like the instrument. Breathe like the instrument. So when I'm playing strings or when I'm playing flute, I'm not just holding it for days, because like a flute player wouldn't hold it for days. So it was a good mold of blend, I would say, of different styles of classical, then being in the church with my father starting at 9. I was playing in the band, playing with the choirs, and I was going nonstop until now. And I just turned, I think about 37 on the 24th of this month. So that was 2 days ago, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm 37 now. Started when I was 3, so basically my whole life has been in the music and learning. So being in the church, so developed in it, the classic organ was, to me, kind of the secondary instrument in regards to being my primary, since all the calls, music directing, or playing for other churches, and a lot of them more modern churches nowadays don't utilize the B3 or organs unless you're in a more traditional, in a respectful way, saying that it's a church that still has the true instruments in the building and actually functionable. So I don't get to use it as much, and then playing organ on a keyboard is not the same, I believe, from my personal preference. But I feel now like a new season has opened up where I get to me, it's special to honor my dad, because my father did pass away in 04 when I was 19, in a way of honoring him, to play the organ and to sit in this seat and to be able to develop this in addition to the piano side. And hopefully I'll be able to share with you the kind of the blend, if you are from the piano side, go into organ and the kind of difference of how to play in that way, the approach of that. So it's definitely special for me, where organ is something I feel like I'm also kind of developing, even though it's a natural feeling for me. And there's different contexts of organ playing that we'll talk about as well. So I did my undergrad in piano performance in 07, church music and worship was my degree, and then did my master's in Afro-Latin jazz piano performance at Cal State LA. And then I was blessed with the opportunity to connect, as he said earlier, with a Christian artist named Tommy Walker for a whole different purpose that God is pouring into me to pour out my purpose even more with songwriting, but it's turned into a partnership with him where I'm on his team and had a lot of blessings and privileges to be able to just be under his wing, his influence, and to be able to, travel locally and also internationally to so many different countries that I've been blessed and amazed, from Kuwait to Korea to South Korea, the Philippines, and it's just obviously Canada and all within the States, and it's just, and now we're working on a European tour, hopefully in May this year. But he's constantly writing, he's constantly creating, so it's a great opportunity for me to use these tools in the studio, in a live performance, and to really be versatile with this gift. So I'm grateful for it, and so that's the current thing that I'm doing. And I'm also just currently just pouring into other churches as God's calling me to, in regards to building other teams to help, same thing that we're doing right now, bridge the gaps with how to apply this if you're able to in your church setting, and just understand it a little bit more. So I'm just, like I said, I'm just really grateful to be here. And I really just want to make sure I don't talk too much. But hopefully just want to make sure that's enough of maybe a little bit of background of just who I am, what I'm doing currently. And if you have any more questions, you can feel free to ask when you would like to as well, now, after as well. So, I like to get a feel for the room before I just start pouring things out there and you leave like you didn't get anything out of it. So, raise your hand if you have played a Hammond organ before. And those who raise your hand, do you have a level of comfort with understanding? Is it a natural, or is it just you just kind of sat on it and kind of did a test drive?
Sat on it.
More of a test drive in and seeing how it works and same? Okay, so there's nobody in here that is a master organ, B3 organ player that can be up here instead of me? Okay. So anything from a lot of just foundational, introductory stuff would be helpful for you?
Yeah.
Can a couple of you just give me a couple of things that you're looking for in this time really quick? Just so I can make sure based off of I gave a worksheet handout, kind of brief overview that we're going to talk about. I want to make sure, is there anything that you came here looking for this presentation? Anybody want to share?
I'm curious about the styles and how that fits into different styles of music.
Okay.
How the instrument really plays into the style.
Okay. Yes.
And then the drawbars,
yes.
how they are, depending on the overtone series and how that relates to traditional pipe organ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm curious about pedal technique and how you're utilizing the pedal in relationship to everything else you're doing with your hands.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that has not been shared that people want to hear about? Perfect. So everything that's on my paper, we're going to cover it. That's perfect. So I should be prepared. So what I want to do is I would like to play for you first, and then we'll start going into the kind of first page overview mechanics of the organ, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That work? So the first tune, I have two tunes that I kind of prepared for you. One more traditional gospel hymn arrangement of "The Blood Will Never Lose Its Power." I'm sure you probably some of you have heard and played that, the blood that Jesus shed for me way back on Calvary. It reaches to the highest mountains, it flows to the lowest valleys. And I want to play that hymn first in a traditional gospel sense. And then you're going to hear me playing kind of in two different personalities, more mellow, and then you'll kind of hear me hinting at the melody, and then it'll start building, and then obviously I'll just be opening it up so you can hear, the character of the pipe of the B3 as it opens up more. And then I have a more modern, contemporary Christian song that I wanted to play for you as well, which I'm sure you're familiar with, "Lord, You Are Good," as well, so you can kind of hear the placement of how I would approach, if that's okay. And please let me know, we're trying to measure out so it's not too loud for you as well, so let me know if it gets too loud, or I'll trust Aiden to kind of give so you're not hurting my feelings if it's too loud, or telling me to bring it down a little bit. I want to make sure I'm making it pleasant for you as well, okay? All right. before I go into the other tune, the mindset of that tune was just more of like, okay, the foundation I had down here, kind of like a pad vibe on a keyboard to kind of let a warm blanket if there was a lead singer or somebody singing. So you have just a warm foundation. It's just what my heart, what my personality was getting at when I started doing that, kind of stuff. Like, it's just because I can do that, this means it's always the right place to do it. But it was a preference, So you understand why he's like this, to understand that was a part of a preference. And also, you'll hear it because that's kind of like culture of when you go to your own home in different countries or different states, or you have this cultural communication language that you use. So I grew up, some of this stuff is just because of what I grew up in. So that's what I've heard, that's what communicates with me, or that's what I feel I want to communicate in the context of that song, if that makes sense. Okay, and then I'll explain why I was using the pedals in that context as well. But the next one, Lord, You're Good, I'm not going to use the pedals because it doesn't have a place for pedals in that tune as well. Okay? And then we'll get to the mechanics right after that. That sound good? Is everything balanced okay? Is it too loud? Is everybody okay? Okay. Should be at the same place. that setting, there will be like so many guitars, possibly one or two, then you have all these synths, then you have drums, then you have piano, then you have electric keyboards and horns and all this extra stuff. So I took a simple, like, I don't want to get in the way of the bass player, and what can I do to kind of help elevate the energy or just support the hits that are happening within the songs. That's why there was no pedals. That's why I didn't go so crazy with filling in, because I had to have a mindset of what other stuff is going on as well, which is already a whole lot going on. So, real quick, overview with this B3, and it's not only the B3 but the Hammond organ. What I've learned is this Hammond was created kind of as a portable version of the traditional church pipe organ. Since, you know, the pipe organs are usually fixed within the building, the pipes are within the structure of the church, the first heart of building this Hammond organ was to actually have the mindset of taking the pipe organ characteristics and abilities and making it portable to be able to move to different locations. And actually, the Leslie was not a part of the Hammond creation when it first started, roughly in the 1930s. It was actually later implemented by a preference and style, but originally, it actually was not supposed to be paired together at all. So when you think of the Hammond organ, it actually wasn't established with the Leslie. There was actually three different styles, models of organs for Hammond, and you'll hear the letter A100 or B3 or C3. So you'll hear A, B, or C for the most part. There has been other smaller different models of Hammonds as well, but the ones who are standard kind of industry of Hammonds is the A, B, and C models. And a simple way of thinking about it is the only difference for the most part between the A, B, and C is the cabinet. And someone said something? You said the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I heard someone say, yes, please, I like feedback and everything. Yes, it's basically not rude at all. The cabinet, basically the structure of the organ itself. The A series actually has down here a speaker built in to it, which was obviously before having a Leslie speaker. And so you'll hear everything coming out of the speaker, which is the model that I have, in there. And then they started handshaking it where you can switch between the speaker, or I have a speaker, or both the Leslie and the speaker, or just the Leslie by itself on a switch on my organ. But it was made just with the speaker, which then you can add your own personal reverb to make it sound like you're in a more church, cathedral, whatever feeling, that just gives a little bit more room to the sound. And then the B3 obviously is what you're seeing right here, which does not have a speaker to it. And then the C series as well is just basically a whole nother cabinetry. Like you'll see some of them that have a little bit more fancier aesthetic kind of legs that either have some like more curvature instead of it just being straight down. So it may look more obviously elegant in whatever setting that you want, personal preference. Just like how all the grand pianos, everything have their own different styles. That's like the heart of the Hammonds, where the cabinet preference is what it is. But basically the guts from day one of all of those are the same. So there's no confusion of which one should I get if you ever wanted one. It's not, you're just saying basically what kind of like a car, what color car do I want, what kind of interior do I want basically, but it's the same engine and it has mostly the same functionalities of everything that you usually get if you get one that's not modified. And then usually what makes it different, which I'm going to go over the standard features on here, but then eventually if you sit at another Hammond organ, you might see some other features, which I'm actually seeing something new that I've never seen on this organ because a lot of people, just like cars, as I'm using as a reference, I'm also a car guy, they also modify their organs for their own personal preference. Some organs have distortion switches because of the whole rock style that we'll talk about, and they want that extra gritty sound to cut through, and you can adjust that on here. This doesn't have it. Some have reverb, mine does. This one actually does, which I usually don't see on a Hammond organ as well, in regards to the B3 on a regular basis. So you'll see those switches, and then there's there's like so many different customizations that you can do to it. But for the foundation of just the everyday use of an organ, first and foremost, I want to make sure, this shouldn't be too loud when I turn it back on, I want to make sure you know how to turn on the organ. If you come to it and you're like, there's two switches, and simple mindset, there's two switches, one called start on your left, my left, your right now, but when you're sitting here, there's a start switch on the left, and then there's a run switch to your right, which the start switch is just if you press it and let go, it's going to come off. Because it's kind of like a igniting, kind of like a stove top, like you're trying to get the fire to start. And then the run, switch on, and it stays on. And that's what keeps it going. So what you want to do is turn on the start, and you hear that kind of like winding up. And you kind of go by ear. There's no hold it for 30 seconds, 20 seconds. Just kind of feel where you feel it kind of hitting that idle. And then you can hold it, turn on the run switch together, and it starts warming up the Leslie as well. And then once you just let it run for a few seconds, and you just turn off the start switch and the run stays on, and you should have turned on the organ. And if you're already pressing the pedal, you'll kind of hear it kind of like warming up. It may sound soft, and then it starts to kind of like just warm up and build, and then you finally got your sound going on in there. So that's kind of how to start the organ, just so you have that mindset of how to turn on the organ. And then there's, as you know, two manuals, which is the two keyboards on the organ. The bottom manual and then the upper manual as well. And you'll see a set of black inverted colors, black. And I know I gave a picture, and it's probably hard to see because it's small, but obviously Google has everything too, or if you have a real organ, you can go and try to apply it as well, and we can hopefully give clearer pictures as well. But this is just like a way, since I didn't know if you're going to be here, right? You're looking at me, just a kind of reference of seeing where things are. So you have inverted colored keys here, where the white keys are now black, the black keys are now white, and this is kind of like your preset section. If you're not comfortable using the drawbars or understanding it as well and doing live playing with it at first, there is presets that were built in there, which were giving the mindset of the pipe organ. So you have different sounds of each one. So if we press this one, I'm starting from C on the bottom of the manual, and C is the cancel. It cancels all the presets. So if I press that C, it lifts up any of the presets that I have down. So if anything gets stuck, press that bottom last key, which is C, and it clears everything. But if I hit the manual, the preset, it sticks, and then different presets that were already made that you can use if you like. And the same thing is for the top manual as well. But then when you get to the last two notes, the B flat and then the upper C, that's where you have full control of the drawbar setting. So if I press the B flat on the above, like right before the upper C, that controls, because there's four groups, there's four sets of drawbars on, as you see on there, on the organ. So you have the first set here, which is controlled by the B flat preset button. So if I press that B flat and it sticks, there should be, I'm at the bottom manual, and the B flat controls the right side of the drawbars. The bottom manual is the right side. You see where it says group, it's really small, group C and D on On the organ, there's up here. So you guys following me? So there's two groups on my left, and then there's two little drawbars by themselves, which control the pedals, and then there's a whole other set of group, two to the right.
Do you think we can walk up there? And
I think that'll be so much easier, because instead of you guys looking at the paper, it'll be so much easier.
Yeah.
So I'm comfortable with that. If you guys would love that, and it'll help let this flow probably a lot easier. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That'll be so much easier to, if you're comfortable, to look at it, that'll be easier to explain.
Everyone, make sure you're going like this, like so. When I take a picture, it looks like you're really in, like.
So I'm saying something really important.
Like hold your chin so I can get a really good.
I love the bow tie. I love the bow tie. Is that Kai? Is that his name, Kai? Kai, I like the bow tie, Kai. Nice. So, what I was saying, obviously I showed you this is the start, and this is the run switch right here. That's what I just did a few moments ago. So you can see this is the one you start on and hold and turn it off. And then here's the two manuals I was saying, and here's the presets that I was talking about right here. And turning, and you see if I press this, these stick. But if I press this, it cancels all of it. And this bottom manual is for these two sets of drawbars here. So if I press here, here's the presets that I was doing. And in here, like this has more of a, and my organ has, like some of them actually have the labels on the organ. Not all of them have it anymore because it's not used in the more classical setting usually. So people in more the gospel side or pop side don't use these presets too much. But if you are able to look at the labels, you'll start seeing something say like assume, or to try to emulate that sound, or flute, or clarinet. This is more the assume vibe, I think. You hear how it's trying to sound like the instruments subtly? Not perfect, but you can see just not. Vibe, you see what I'm saying? So each one has the different characteristics of trying to sound like the organ, some of the presets that you'll see on there that says the actual instruments. So that was the purpose of these sets. But then when you get to B flat and B, that's when you have the full settings of these. So when I press B flat and these are pulled in, I'm not going to get any sound until I pull out the settings. Same here, nothing's happening unless I press B. So I can create my own presets, depending on your comfortability. If you don't want to pull things while you're playing, you can go ahead and have your, soft and loud presets if you want, and you can switch back and forth. So you can just switch between these two depending on your comfort. So whatever you feel comfortable, kind of like driving a stick shift or driving a manual, you have that preference. And then the same thing is for this top manual, but it's just for these two drawbar settings. So the B flat here is for this set of drawbars, and the B is for these set of drawbars. And then there's two drawbars here, and that's controlling the pedals that are down here. And it's just the lower octave and the octave buttons.
Are each set that way?
They're all set.
16, 8.
Yes, 16 and 8. This is when you think about that. And we can, and speaking of that, just so you understand, if you sound like some of you already do understand, the purpose of these drawbars were, and if you want a chair, we can get a chair as well. I want to make sure everybody's comfortable so you're not standing and I'm not comfortable sitting here. The purpose of these drawbars, initially, obviously, there's either my set of harmonics of 16, which has, like an octave is 8. Notes. So you can look at it as a number system of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is an octave. But obviously 8, and if you add another 8, then it's 16, so it's a lower. So it's like you think numbers in that way, but at the same time, it's also the original form, if you're thinking of the pipe organ. They were actually trying to emulate the length of the pipes. So when you're saying like 16, and you're thinking like 16, feet kind of thing, and then 8 feet, and then 5 3/4 feet. So like when you see the pipes on the where the pipes are there? There's no pipes.
Oh, this is the digital.
Okay, so when you see, as you know, when you see the pipes, you see the different lengths of the pipes, and that's what these were actually trying to emulate. So you're thinking that mindset of, oh, okay, here's my 16. I mean, and then, but that's a harmony right there. The fifth. So obviously you're like, okay, when I'm pulling out that drawbar, it's like, why am I getting two different notes? So you want to be mindful of what each drawbar does, so you're not fighting the chords and the colors and basically the overtones that you will naturally start hearing when you're really opening up and breathing. You'll naturally start hearing overtones cut through, so that's kind of like the space of what the organs will do. So normally home base, so you want to hear the actual note that you're playing. Like say if you're playing middle C, your standard is skipping the first two, which is the low octave, as if I'm playing here. If I'm playing on the piano and I play this note and I pull this one out, this is actually this lower note down here. So if I want to hear the true value of this note, you want to skip the first two darker ones and start with the white drawbar, because that's the true note value of what that should sound like, and then you can add the octave. So that's what that compass is for that. So if you want to really understand, okay, here's the true sound of what I'm playing. If I'm playing on the piano, this is the less muddy, safe place to start. And then you have, and then I have it here as well, even though it's hard to see, they say unison. Obviously, if you think in perfect unison, it's the standard, like it matches with the piano or matches with, if I have to give a middle C or a certain note, this is the one to start with. And then the next one is a fourth, which is A, so that means an octave higher, versus, so naturally that would kind of just feel like, okay, now I'm just starting to layer the organ. So now I'm like here, now I'm playing 2 notes, now I'm playing 3 notes. So that kind of is where the overtones and also the power of the organ comes through when you're thinking of it that way. So it's like you have the 8, the 4, and then the next white is basically, the whites are the octaves. So before you miss with any of the blacks, the darker colors, you have a standard, up an octave, one more octave, another octave.
What happens if you don't pull them all the way up?
If you don't pull, it's basically, a simple way of thinking about how much you pull out is volume.
Well, it's volume.
Yes. It doesn't affect, yes, exactly. It doesn't affect the sound coming through. You see up here.
Yeah.
And you see numbers 1, 2, just think of the volume. I'm turning it up at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, full volume.
Yeah.
And then obviously, which we didn't talk about down here on the pedal, there's only one pedal down here that I'm using, and that's my main volume pedal as well. So that also controls the volume as well. So if I have it all the way down, which is this way, all the way down, it's still going to be some sound that comes out. So it's not completely off when I have it down. So it doesn't ever go all the way down. So be careful of that if you ever play and think, like, I have it down, but it's still going. That's where you got to control your volume here. So if you're playing prayer or playing underneath, it's like, why am I still hearing something? Because of that. So then this is like, it's like a multi kind of way of thinking of how do I control my volume. So when I'm playing, I can do my own kind of thing to get it all the way down. So it's just a volume thing. And then what you'll run into sometimes, because this one is well taken care of, but you'll run into a lot of organs where as simple as dust getting inside of these things, you'll start hearing them not responding well. So maybe you'll play it and it's like you don't hear anything because it's dirty. So if you have any issues, so it's always good to check too what I just did. So I know they all work, because sometimes they won't. because it's just simple, just dirty, and it just needs to be clean. And then sometimes if you ever run into something that is dirty, you just do simple elbow grease, and it'll work out the dust most of the time. It should work out. You'll start hearing a little kind of crickly, crackly, like crack, and then you start hearing it opening up, and then it works naturally. So that's a way of kind of a little trick to kind of clean out these drawbacks if you ever have any issues with that. And then what is over here, like this is what I was talking about over here, something I saw new for the first time. And because I don't normally see this on an organ, so this was a modification added to this organ, which is nothing I'm trying to get into, but it's basically an additional amp to make the organ louder. That's all that they decided to do, and then you can control the settings to tweak it, and I want more bass, and more treble, but I want more volume too.
This
So
organ has a history.
huh?
This organ has a
He
history.
was telling me, I know Bill, because he serves my dad's organ, and he was telling me a lot of history that we played on this a couple days ago. So not to go too much into that because you may not see it on every organ. But what you will see on most organs are these three switches up here. Toggle switches, and one is a volume, just as self-explanatory. We see volume, normal, and soft. So if you want the volume to be softer, hit that soft button, and then you don't have to like feel like I have to control it so much on the pedal. You can just have it here. You don't have to find it versus, so that it's just a volume button. Then you have two vibrato buttons here, which give a little bit extra character to, just like your voice, when you have vibrato while you're singing, you can just have a flat tone where it's just nothing happening versus a little extra movement. And there's two settings on here that are controlled by this little twisty knob here. And you'll see vibrato and chorus. Vibrato is obviously what you think voice, the vibrato. And then chorus just kind of gives a little bit more kind of space to the sound. It's like there's like a technical engineer kind of mixing and producing sound that you can give us not to worry about in the moment, but it just kind of gives a little bit more openness.
Kind of like a 6 and a 12-string guitar.
There you go. That's a good way to look at it. I never thought of it that way. But I never thought of it that way.
What did she say? When you...
Versus a 6 and a 12-string guitar.
Oh, okay.
It just opens up the sound.
That harmony. Good acoustics.
Yeah, I like that. So you'll see here the letter C and the letter V, which represents chorus and vibrato. And then you'll see the numbers C1, V1, C2, V2, C3, and V3. And that is only the level of intensity of how much the vibrato of the chorus sounds. So like I have it here and I have it on C1 and it's on, and it's off. You don't really hear much of a difference. But then when I go up, you hear it's slowly giving, and then when I go higher, it gives a subtle more intensity of that sound. So if you don't want so much, you can you hear the difference?
So is it the speed or is it the width?
I would say my preference, I actually would say it's the width.
Of the vibrato?
Yes, because the vibrato is still the same, but it's less intense.
Got it.
So it's not stretching as much. Just like the singing, like you can feel some slight waves, or you can feel it going that way. So that's between C1, C3, or V1 and V3. So that's another preference of what you would like. Vibrato great is basically like the pipe organ where they want to call this manual the great manual, and then the upper manual is the swell. So this great switch controls the bottom chorus and vibrato settings, and then the vibrato swell is the one that controls the exact same settings but just for the top. So when you look at swell, you look at great, don't think this vibrato is going to be greater, this vibrato is swell. You know, like think of this is what they're calling that manuals, which are similar to the pipe organ titles that they would call the manuals for the pipe organs manuals. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you think at the end, after some of us can play on the instrument?
Of course, I would love to have you guys sit here and do that as well.
I think Sarah Edwards really wanted to play on this.
Yes, yes. I love that.
Felix does.
I would love that. And then I mentioned the pedals. This is basically the same thing, the octave and the lower octave. Standard is kind of hearing, for me, you usually hear the lower octave, which is 16 number, as you look at it, versus the upper octave. For organ playing, because for solo, if I was playing by myself without a band, or and I'm kind of like trying to emphasize obviously some of the bottom end, then I will have the pedal out on playing because it helps support what I'm doing. Versus not having. But it just gives that extra foundation, filling it. And it also helps because obviously the organ doesn't have a sustain pedal. So it kind of helps also serve as a glue while you're switching or changing. Since we have multiple things that we might be doing, it just helps to have, while I'm here and I need to maybe, you see I just lifted this hand up, but I still have this going. So it's not losing as if I'm like here and I'm like, trying to do this, or turn on my Leslie. So it's nice to have kind of that kind of support. So that mindset of the pedal a lot of times is more of, I don't need to be a bass player. I just need to kind of help glue this together. So it doesn't need to be super, that's why I don't always, unless you're like the purpose of the context of what you're doing, you don't need to have both of them pulled out and be super loud because it just starts kind of getting in the way of what you're probably playing here. You don't need that here, it just makes it louder. So it's like, this just kind of helps the next level. So like for me, the mindset of organ playing in a band is really thinking, as I was taught, is the registers and basically your lane. Like, where should I be when I'm playing? If I'm playing with a bass player, most of the time you don't want to be having these pedals out while they're playing that note, because you're kind of taking away their role of how they want to support and play with their rhythm. Because if you're like just sitting there going, and he's trying to go on, and you're like, you know, like that's like, okay, this ain't gonna work. You know, like you may think you're doing a good thing and you're tapping away, but it's kind of getting in the way of the musicality of each space and each place of the song. So like when I'm playing, I don't want everything to be like I'm playing Muddy down here, and I have this here, and this low, and so everything is just in the same register, and it just gets muddy. So you don't hear the delicacy of the organ, because I'm just playing all close. So that's why you're going to be like, okay, I can't have this one out, because this is getting in the way of this. And then I have this octave, so I'm actually playing here, while this is sitting down an octave or two lower. So I'm giving myself different areas to breathe. So it cuts through, so when I'm playing, I'm still hearing this without this being here, instead of, it's like, that doesn't work, it doesn't sound as pleasant. So that's why you're like, okay, what should I use with these octaves and the purpose of that? So when you're in a band, most of the time you're probably wanting to see pedals anymore on the organs because it's not as common unless it isn't traditional, like in a place that's set up and you can utilize it. Take care.
He's wearing it out.
Okay, take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. So the pedal settings, like you want to use that only when you're in a context of kind of carrying the service or carrying something solo. in that way, then you have a place of beauty. And then the last few buttons on this side is what they call the percussion. And you hear more of the percussion in the jazz setting for the most part, because it just gives a little more character to their soloing. And the percussion usually is only controlled by the custom preset of B on the keyboard computer. Only on the top manual, and it's the B setting. So if you have any other setting, this percussion is on, and you're not going to hear any percussion at all. But then when you press the B, and that's the percussion, it just gives a little bit more bite. So you're hearing the organ, so it's like you're not hearing just only. It's like, okay, I hear that, but then if I have the percussion, it kind of gives a little bit more articulation. So that's a little bit more bite to kind of feel like, okay, kind of like when you're doing strings, as I say, like, okay, there could be legato, but then when you add a little bit extra, like staccato or like pizzicato, it kind of like in the context of the song or the context of the room, you just kind of, it's kind of like takes you to the, you can hear the articulation and what you're trying to say a little bit more. So it helps in that way and builds that kind of character. The percussion, like I said, is the B setting, and then there's on and off, and then you turn it on. And then next to it is the volume, standard, soft, or normal. So your preference. And then you have decay, which is basically how long the percussion rings. And it's very subtle. So fast means it just goes away like, and then decay, slow means it may last a little bit longer. You kind of ring a little bit, and this might help. A little bit longer versus. And even though this room echoes, so it doesn't help, but basically it's shorter of sustaining. So it doesn't last as long. So you can have a little bit more bite. And then you have harmonic selector, which is basically just like the harmonics on the piano or the keyboard. When you press second, it's basically the same note you're playing. If I play E flat, it's the E flat note. You know, in that way. But if I press, sorry, I didn't press the wrong one. Second, and then the percussion, you have the same note. But then when you press the harmonic selector third, and it actually does the fifth of the note.